Welcome to the Divorce Survival Guide podcast, where we have open and honest conversations about co-parenting, separation, divorce, and the hardest question of all, should you stay or should you go? I'm Kate Anthony, your divorce survival guide, and I'm here to help you navigate some of the roughest waters you've ever swum in and answer some of your toughest questions. I've been to hell and back, and now it's my mission in life to help you get to the other side of this process with your sanity and your heart intact.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I have with me the one and only, my dear friend, Tina Swithin. And we are talking about Family Court Awareness Month, which she founded 5 years ago. I am so excited to welcome Tina back to the show. And we are going to talk today about the systemic obstacles from the lack of judicial training on domestic violence to the financial incentives that keep conflicts alive in family court. We also talk about important legislative efforts and the importance of grassroots advocacy. And there's a little bit of a call to action in this episode for those of you who are on the other side. If you're kind of going through this process and you're like, Jesus, I just want to get involved in, making change and helping women and family court, advocacy or domestic violence advocacy, all of that. We don't recommend that you do it now because you're in it, but we also don't want you to walk away when you're done without working on some grassroots advocacy. So we've got some calls to action and how you can do that when the time is right. So make a note, flag your calendar, and you can make a difference. You really, really can. And it's really important that you do. Without further ado, here is my conversation with my dear friend and colleague, Tina Swithin. Tina, thank you so much for coming back on the show, but really also just for all of your work, your friendship, camaraderie, and just all of the work that you do. It's truly just incredible.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here and share space with you.
This is Family Court Awareness Month, so named by you 5 years ago. It is now in its 5th year, which is incredible. And it's really gaining traction and so much more web presence and visibility. I'm wondering if you might talk about sort of how things have evolved over the last 5 years when you first started this.
Well, going back to the very beginning, I wish I could share with you that it was this elaborate, drawn out plan. It was an idea I had spontaneously, and we had about six weeks to pull it together from concept to fruition. In 2020, I had this idea of, we're tackling family court issues at so many different levels. We have the policy and legislation. We have support for survivors and creating communities of survivors. But the one missing component that I've continued to see is the community level. So many of these survivors in their towns, in their communities, feel so isolated because nobody gets it. Mm-hmm. And so we were looking for a way to create awareness and start these difficult conversations at the community level. Because sometimes I feel like we're all screaming into a void of
no shit.
we all get it because we're all living it. But
right.
The people that we are standing in line with at the coffee shop or our bank tellers, people don't understand what is happening in the family court system until they've experienced it. And so, this idea was, let's start this conversation in communities. And so from concept to bringing it to life, 6 weeks, Sandra Ross from California Protective Parents and I came together. She offered originally to volunteer 15 hours a week for a couple of weeks. And 5 years later, she's still at the helm. But I basically put my whole family in an RV. We did a huge press conference in Los Angeles with Senator Susan Rubio, Anna Estevez, Jacqueline Franchetti, a couple of other advocates. And we kicked off on November 1st of 2020. My family drove from Los Angeles all the way to North Carolina and back. And we did press conferences and media stops the whole way through. And it was really well received and truly amazing to watch survivors stand up in their own communities and share their stories. For a lot of them, it was the very first time. And, I thought we are really onto something because this has been a missing piece.
It really is astonishing to me, the number of people who really don't get it. Everyone's first thought is, oh, well, if you go to court, then you'll get justice. If you go to court, then surely then they will, right? And most of the women I work with have, and that you've worked with, right? We have that same feeling when we enter the system that like, well, this is where we get justice. This is where we get protection. This is where I just have to tell my story and they'll totally get it. And then we find out that the opposite is actually the case, or it's just not that simple.
Right. You think you just go in and tell the truth and that everyone gathers around and that we're all there to protect kids and that's what it's all about. And you end up leaving there feeling, I call it institutional betrayal. It's a coin or a term that was coined by Dr. Jennifer Freyd. And it's such a good descriptor of it because so many of us leave just feeling this deep sense of betrayal because we're met with victim blaming, victim shaming, and then come to find out that not only is everybody not there to protect kids, they're there to prioritize parental rights over our children's safety. And they've created revenue streams out of our children. And so you just walk into this arena that no one is equipped for because it just defies logic. We have to infuse logic back into family court. If it was ever there to begin with, I don't know.
Yeah. So for those who are listening and may not be familiar with, when you say things like they've created revenue streams out of this, can you just expound on that a little bit and explain what you mean?
There's a lot of professionals who work in the family court system who they are financially incentivized by the conflict. And so I picture it to be vultures just circling over these family court buildings, just waiting to see who has, if you're a family that doesn't have a lot of financial resources, it's still not a great situation for anyone. You're going to be pushed through like cattle. Your children are not prioritized. It is really a disheartening system. But what I have found over the past 13 years is the more money a family has, the more they are targeted by these professionals who claim to care so much about keeping the children involved with both parents and engaging both parents. But there are truly some parents who do not deserve a seat at the table. We are seeing people who are, I call them reunification profiteers. They are so intent on reunifying children with parents who, in many cases, have been found to be abusive. It's not just allegations. It is parents who are abusive. But these people are making ungodly amounts of money, and the courts are so overburdened that they are deferring to a lot of these people who have positioned themselves as experts, and it's terrifying to watch.
When you're saying like the vultures, right, we often think about litigators, right? Obviously, they're first in line, right? They're creating this conflict. And then you've got the reunification therapists and the alienation industrial complex. Judges are often requiring, right, children to go through this reunification process, are the judges profiting? Are there kickbacks happening to the judges who are recommending these camps or therapies or whatever you want to call them?
I think there's a scale, like with so many things. I think there are some judges who are just, uneducated. It's shocking for most people to realize that most judges have zero training in the 101 of domestic abuse. And so they're ill-equipped to be doing the job they're given. And so you've got those judges on one end of the scale who I do believe they think they're doing the right thing. And they are believing these air quote professionals who are, really touting the importance of two parents versus just one. And then at the other end, I think you have absolute corruption. Mm-hmm. I think you have judges who, maybe they're not, exchanging thousands of dollars per se, but they may be treated to a, villa in Tuscany for the summer. Or you do have some that are working volunteer. There's a judge in Los Angeles, I won't name names, but she was working for a very well-known networking group, court group, I won't say names, and making $250,000 a year as the chair of the California chapter. And that group has direct ties to reunification camps and reunification profiteers. So do I believe she was incentivized to send multiple children that we know of to these camps? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I think that there's a wide scale from just uneducated to corrupt.
Yeah. And I think that's right. That's sort of, I think everywhere there are people, and that's the, if we could at least cut off the arm of the uneducated, right? Like that leg of it, if we could stop that, but they don't even want to do that, right? They're not interested in that.
Well, and when I've been a part of legislation, pushing legislation in different states for judicial education, that is the one component of some of these child safety bills where the judicial organizations come out with guns blazing. They do not want any part of it. And the California Judicial Council, when it was trying to be pushed through with Piqui's law, they called the judicial education burdensome. These are burdensome. These are judges who are they're cradling children's lives in their hands. And we just had another child murder here in California just in July. And, it's another case where it's not, it's horrifying enough for a child to be murdered, but to know that it was completely preventable. I can say that 100% about this particular case. It was so preventable. And it is really a matter of, if I got to wave a magic wand and I would create, just like a hospital has a triage unit, our family courts need a triage unit when a case is deemed high conflict, which a lot of people don't like that term because it only takes one person to create conflict. And we know this. However, when we're not going to get away from that label, when they are labeled as high conflict, they need to be triaged. And there needs to be professionals in place who are not financially motivated by conflict and who are educated on trauma and domestic abuse and how victims and perpetrators present and child sexual abuse and all of these things. It's shocking that that's not happening.
The thing that I find so shocking is how prevalent these things are. I think there's this level of denial of what you and I hear, the stories that you and I hear every single day. And when I sort of say these things to, my friends, random people who are not remotely in this area, even my friends who are attorneys and litigators, they're not in the family court system. They don't actually know the level of abuse that really is happening in our country, in particular, I think in our country. although not exclusively, but I think are higher levels here for a variety of reasons. And that it's sort of like people think that, well, the system should work because, well, we have all the checks and balances in place, or, right, it's not that big of a deal. It's not that. And that I think they don't understand the level that we see. Those of us who are educated, those of us who are trained, those of us who are like actual boots on the ground in this will tell you that this is at crisis levels.
It's a crisis. It absolutely is.
And so I guess if you don't realize that it's a crisis, you're not going to have a triage unit for it, right? And so, and you and I have talked so much about the awareness campaigns that need to happen and people don't want to hear it. Like, right, this is stuff people don't want to hear. Right. Or when they hear a story, they think it's an isolated incident. They don't think that this is systemic.
Right, right.
I want to go back because you mentioned Piqui's law and you mentioned the judicial training required. So can you just, for those who don't know, just give a little bit of an overview of Kayden's law and thereby Piqui's law, and like what is in those laws and what are they, and are they law?
Yeah. So at the federal level 2 years ago, Kayden's law was passed. Kayden was a 7-year-old in Pennsylvania. Her mom is a dear friend of mine, Kathy Sherlock. And again, another case where a child was murdered and it was absolutely preventable. If anyone were to read this guy's rap sheet, what he had been arrested for in the past, what he had done, a child.
To be clear, her father.
Her father.
Kayden's father. Yes. It's important to stress.
Yes. And Kathy fought to have him supervised. Kathy fought to protect her daughter. And she was murdered in a very brutal way. And Kayden's law was then passed through with VAWA, Violence Against Women Act, at the federal level. And it calls for 4 different key points. I don't have them up with me right now, but one of them is raising the standard of experts who can testify in family court. Another one is judicial education, banning treatments that are considered to be experimental, such as reunification camps and other reunification treatments, which even those at the top level doing these treatments have admitted that they are experimental. Raising the standards for what can be considered, what research and things, empirically peer-reviewed data and research in family court cases. Again, things that are common sense. But the federal level is wonderful. However, each state is in charge of its own family court system. So now it's a matter of taking this legislation that was created by a group of wonderful advocates who are all very child-centric, and now having people in their own state pass legislation. So Piqui's law in California has several components to Kayden's law. It calls for a ban on reunification camps, and it also calls for judicial education. Not the level that is needed. However, some of these bills are so hard to pass in a package. You have to break it down piece by piece. Mm-hmm. In Arizona, we took the component of Piqui's law that bans reunification camps and passed that on its own. Utah has passed Ohm's law, and that is a more packaged version of Kayden's law. Colorado has passed Kayden's law. Tennessee passed Abriel's law, and each have their own components of it.
And just to be clear, every single one of these laws is named after a child who was murdered by a parent that was completely preventable.
Absolutely.
So Piqui was a child, right? All of these laws with these different names, they're all named after a child who was murdered.
Yeah, Piqui's mom, Anna Estevez, is just an incredible human. The judge on her case had been practicing business law for 25 years, had no experience in family court, and in my opinion, sentenced Piqui to his death by putting him with a man who was very dangerous, who took him to Disneyland wanted to give him a wonderful last day on earth, and then smothered him to death in the back of a car.
In the parking lot, right? A parking lot of Disneyland.
Anna has gone on to advocate for other children. Piqui was her only son. You know, I was with her at the state capitol when Piqui's law was passed, and he was there with us. She brings him in an urn, and it is something no mother should ever have to experience. It's devastating. What she has been through is the fact that she can get out of bed every morning is miraculous. But the fact that she has gone on to pass a major law, probably the biggest child safety law in California family court history, you know, she's powered by the pain and the trauma that she's experienced. And to think that judges who are responsible for these children being murdered are still on the bench. And that's when we talk about checks and balances and accountability. That's the part that's shocking to so many. You know, if you made a decision in any job where you are responsible for a child being murdered, I would think you would
not have
your
that
job duties.
Yeah, you would probably not have that job. And not only that, but judges who hear these stories, who read the case law, still fight against having these laws enacted.
Yeah.
Because it's too much work. As you said, it's too laborious, right?
Right. And, you know, in fact, there was an individual who works in the reunification industry who recently just did a whole seminar on how to combat Kayden's law and other child safety laws. And what her advice to people, if you want to shut down one of these laws, is to rally the judges. She said this. I watched her say this. It is shocking to me. And when we passed Piqui's law in California, it shut down her operation because she was running a reunification camp. And now she has gone off to Canada and set up shop there.
Wow.
I just testified at the House of Commons in Canada and put it on their radar that we are starting to run them out of the United States. And now your country is becoming a hotbed for them. So, you know, it's terrifying.
And Canada needs to know about it because, you know, a lot of time the parents are going to take their kids and take them to Canada, right? I mean, it's Canada or Mexico. So
yeah. And you know, there's a mother who was in Texas who her daughters were ordered, or her children were ordered into a reunification camp. She fled with her children to Mexico. And then the Hague Convention ruled in her favor, and her children are safe, but she's stuck in Mexico because so we have US citizens who are fleeing to Mexico for safety. I mean, if that isn't shocking, I don't know what is.
I mean, at this point, it's not even that shocking to me, but
right.
It's not shocking to me, but it should be shocking. It should be. Yeah. This is why you in particular are so exhausted. The work that you have done has had tremendous impacts on your physical health, your emotional health. Like you've learned and you've had to learn how to set boundaries and for yourself, right? Because this is really hard, difficult stuff. So I just wanted to know about some of the educational initiatives that you've implemented, like the good news. You know, how can individuals and communities rally together to support affecting this kind of change? You know, after 5 years of raising awareness about these things. Well, you've been doing it for a lot more than 5 years, but officially as Family Court Awareness Month, What are some of the changes? Obviously, the Piqui's Law, Kayden's Law, like these are wonderful things. What are some of the educational initiatives that are starting to take hold and maybe take root?
So, with Family Court Awareness Month, the first couple of years, it was really dedicated to getting people to request proclamations, declarations from their cities, counties, states, declaring, let's say the state of Texas as Family Court Awareness Month for November. And that's been incredibly powerful to watch. You have somebody in their little hometown city or in Miami, Florida, who is presented with this declaration or proclamation, and they're able to stand up and tell their story for the first time. And you have mayors and board of supervisors who are looking at them saying, we had no idea that this was happening. How can we help? Mm-hmm. And so these conversations within communities are so important. And that's one of the things that has been really, really incredible to watch is we've had over 300 cities, counties, and states declare November as Family Court Awareness Month in the past few years. Now, what we're really trying to do is get people we're passing torches. We're saying, now take it and run with it. And one of the things I've done at One Mom's Battle, my main organization, is create these private chapters, one for each state, mm-hmm. and getting people together and mobilizing them. Some of these state chapters are some of them are based on just support, helping each other, doing court watches, because we know when everyone's watching, judicial officers tend to sit up a little bit straighter. So we have found success with court watches and really mobilizing people in that. But then other of our other state chapters, they're getting together and they're implementing legislative change. Michigan is a really great example. They have a dedicated team, Michigan Protective Parents, and OMB. They've had rallies. They've had multiple events, and they're fighting for Kayden's Law in Michigan. And it's incredible to watch. They just raised money for a billboard to be put up in a specific location in Michigan for Family Court Awareness Month. And so really empowering survivors, because when you are able to find purpose, you and I both know that from what you've been through.
Yeah.
Using, I use my anger and fury at the system every day as fuel to keep going and to keep trying to tackle this from every angle, but to watch survivors find purpose and say, yes, this is what's happened to my children, but I'll be damned if this is going to happen to my grandchildren. We have to break these cycles. We have to make change for our future generations. And, it's been incredible to watch. And also we have so many of the kids who are starting to age out of the system. And I have said for over a decade, those kids will be the change. My daughters, they have been involved in advocacy. My youngest is 17 and a half. She's, helped to lead protests in front of courthouses. And it's, they will be the change. So I'm also trying to organize young adults who have experienced this and can speak to it. One of the things we also do is we know, like we've talked about, you can't get accountability. Judges are allowed to make decisions that ruin lives or children are murdered, and they're still sitting on the bench. So we've been calling them out. We've been putting their faces out there and saying, this judge has done this, and we need a spotlight on this. And, hopefully that generates media attention, because that's where my hope is at this point. People like you bringing this to their communities. And we've seen bigger media outlets, the Washington or the Wall Street Journal just did a big story this year, which is incredible.
Right.
That's a lot of what we need and what we're trying to accomplish.
We need so much more of that. So much more of that. One of the things that we've also seen in this last year, I don't know, or last couple of years, is, the kids taking to social media in the process, I mean, we saw this tremendously with Maya and Sebastian, who basically live streamed their abduction, or their friends did, live streamed their abduction from their father's home into a reunification camp that they eventually escaped. Are they still in hiding?
No, their dad has full custody of them now, which, yeah, they're safe.
Yeah, I'd missed that update. But, you've got with social media, and the kids are really using social media, using TikTok, using Instagram to really to tell their stories. And when the kids are saying, this is what my parent did to me, and this is how I was abused, and this is how the court ruled, right? People get outraged.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of them come with really solid receipts. Here is a recording of my parent screaming at me, of my parent abusing me. And this judge still has placed me in custody. There's a 14-year-old young lady right now in Arizona that has been forced into the custody of her father, who there are pretty strong allegations of his abuse. And I've heard some of the recordings, and I would definitely, in my humble opinion, I would say it is abusive, and all contact with mom has been cut off. And it's another situation where you can see the same players, professionals in air quotes, who are profiting off of reunifying children with abusive parents. And when a victim of domestic abuse leaves a relationship, it's about power and control, and that just transfers into the courts, and the court becomes the new venue of abuse. And that's what's happening. And so these kids speaking out, I do believe, will be a huge part of the change.
Yeah, I think so too. It's really powerful. I think it's a really powerful aspect of it. You mentioned the One Mom's Battle chapters, the state chapters, and I really want to actually hit on that for a second, because, I have a lot of clients that as they're going through the process, they're like, I want to go and testify, and I want to go and make change. This is terrible. And I always say, wait, right? You cannot be an advocate when you're still in it. Like you just can't. Because number one, you could shoot yourself in the foot. You're going to shoot your case in the foot. Number two, you don't have the emotional bandwidth for it. But when they are on the other side, if you are listening right now and you are on the other side, join your local One Mom's Battle Facebook group, because each of those chapters does have this, it's a lot of support. It's a lot of questions. It's a lot of help. And it's a lot of advocacy and court watch, and how can we affect change. So I think that for sort of the grassroots level of this, you have created these chapters that I think are the most effective form of sort of grassroots advocacy. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's been amazing to watch. And I completely agree with you too, is when I was in my own battle, there is no way I could have done advocacy work. I don't think my kids would have been safe today had I used any of my energy for that. And I don't think I was in a good place to do that. I do understand there are parents where it puts them at great risk to start speaking out. And I've seen parents lose custody of their kids because of their advocacy efforts. We don't believe that's okay. That should have never happened. And we need everyone screaming from the rooftops, but you have to put your kids first. And I agree with you completely on that. There is plenty of work to be done when your kids are safe, but and there are parents where they've already lost their kids. And when you have nothing else to lose, then grab a bullhorn and we will put you, put you in, because we need all of us to be sharing our stories. The unfortunate part is a lot of these parents, when they do lose everything, they also get gag orders and they're silenced because they become a threat to the system. And so that's a challenging part. But what we've seen in the state chapters and that grassroots, so many of the parents who have successfully protected their kids and they're still in it. They're still giving support to survivors. They're still, sharing what worked for them, what didn't work for them. just trying to figure out, I have this new judge. What has everyone's experience been like with this judge? Just that alone, having a community of others who get it, who can share those things, stay away from this professional, go towards this professional. It's invaluable. And so much of what we've created at OMB, One Mom's Battle, is what I wish I would have had when I was going through it, in that community support, other people who get it, and you don't have to try to explain it to them. They get it because they've lived it or they are currently living it. It's powerful.
Yeah, it really is. And I love that, one of the things that you do is sort of calling out professionals, right? If you hear something negative about a court or legal professional, you will ask others if they have also had a negative experience. And if is it 3? If you have 3 strikes against them, then you will actually put them on blast on your website, right?
Yeah. So we'll feature them. We'll say, tell us about this professional. I'm very careful how I word it so I don't end up in court. And but what has come from some of those, Southern California is a great example. There have been quite a few people who have had really negative experiences with the same professionals. We've connected them all. We've got a couple of, fierce advocate leaders in those areas who are rallying the troops, and you get things like class action lawsuits, or we've actually seen movement in some of these areas, which is what is needed. You shine the spotlight and people start coming forward with the same stories about the same professionals. And, that's one way to create change, accountability.
And then another thing that you have is your packets that people can request be sent to their judges, and they come from One Mom's Battle. So, and there's no trace back to the person who requested it, right? Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit more about those packets?
Yeah, it's called educateyourjudge.com. My husband has turned our entire garage into a production factory, and it's something that he has taken on as a project, but people can request an educational informational packet to be sent to their judge, to a GAL, a guardian ad litem, or any other professional custody evaluator. Like you said, it comes from our organization, so there's no ties or trace to the person requesting it. And, I'm very transparent about it. If you have somebody, when we were talking about the scale earlier, if you have somebody on the end of the scale where they're just uneducated, they don't really understand these dynamics, they can be incredibly powerful. If you have someone who's colluding and corrupt, I wouldn't even waste your time. There's no point in it. I'm very, very upfront with people about that, but there are stories that we've heard that tell us that we are onto something with these packets. People have sent them to the principal of their child's school to help educate them, because that's another area where survivors don't find support. It's so easy to just chalk these things up to two parents who can't put their differences aside and do what's best for the kids. And That's so right. You feel like you're being gaslit or further abused when you're not heard and when people don't get it. So, the packets can be used for a variety of things.
I didn't really think about having them sent to the principals and the guidance counselors at schools. I think that is everyone listening. Sorry to your husband right now. I'm going to apologize in advance. But I think this is such an important thing, right? To have this sent to the people who are actually making decisions about your children, not just legal decisions, but educational decisions. I know I have people in my life even who, this is like such a this is such a shit show, but it's so contentious and abusive, right? That one parent has legal decision-making on education and one has it for medical. Now, the areas where medical and education overlap are, multitudinous, especially if there are any learning differences, which there are in this case. And so, one is constantly trying to one up the other. The abuser, in this case is the mother, is constantly trying to undermine the medical quote power, right? The decision making that he has by overriding it with education. It's insanity. And so the school's kind of stuck in the middle,
Right.
and I think that our biases tend towards believing the mother often. Well, maybe not in court, but right, like in schools and stuff, usually the mothers are the ones that are more engaged and more involved. And so, right. And then, but when she's the one who's gaslighting and lying, the kids are just trying to get through school, right? They're just trying to get through their lives. If you had the principals and the guidance counselors and whoever else actually educated in this way, it would make a tremendous difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Just for the children.
Yeah. And regardless, when you're talking about an abusive parent, that person typically presents much better than the other parent. And so it can be confusing to, people who do mean well and they're there for the kids and they want to be a solid foundation for the kids and the family. But it's confusing because a lot of times I look back at myself 14 years ago, 15 years ago, when my case started, and my ex-husband really did excel in front of people. And here I have been so traumatized from years of abuse that I looked like a deer in headlights. I'm shaking. I can't form sentences. And so, that, and when people aren't educated on these things, they believe the person who presents better, unfortunately.
That's right. We look unhinged. They're standing there saying she's unhinged, and we look unhinged. And so there we go. And this is, all the other work that that you and I do with our clients, trying to get them to places of some clarity so that they can be strategic, so that they can actually function in this system while being abused. But these are the areas that it is so important to highlight. So looking ahead, Tina, what are your goals for the future of Family Court Awareness Month and the broader movements of family court reform?
Your second question first. The platform we've created at One Mom's Battle, it really started such an organic way. One mom. That's what that's what it started with. And today we have just over 250,000 people worldwide on our social media platforms. So it has become an incredible vehicle whenever there is legislation in a state that we need to help push through to the finish line, and calls to action to get people involved. That's really where I see the future of OMB is One Mom's Battle, not just creating safe spaces for survivors, helping them to understand the importance of strategy, awareness of the education component, because so many just walk in believing that, everybody's there to do the right thing. That's not true. So the education, the support, and then the bigger picture for the advocacy. My goal is to really get more media attention on this. My background is PR. And so that's kind of the direction I see myself going in this next chapter. For Family Court Awareness Month, we have so many torches to pass out, and we really need people to step up, grab those torches. Maybe you can't be public. Maybe it's too dangerous for your case, for your kids, but maybe you can just share on social media that November is Family Court Awareness Month. That's not bad-mouthing your ex. That's not putting your case in danger. It's helping us to create awareness. And then there are other people who are working behind the scenes, coordinating volunteer efforts, social media. We have a place for everybody to get involved. And the place to start would be to join your state chapter of One Mom's Battle at ombchapters.com. Amazing.
Tina, thank you so much for everything that you do for all the moms and parents who are struggling and suffering through this. And I'm just so grateful for all your work and your partnership, your friendship, all of it. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. If you like what you hear, head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen in and leave me a review. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at the Divorce Survival Guide. I'll see you next time, and until then, remember, you, my love, deserve to be happy.